really is a pleasure to be here, but I have to thank my colleague, Rick Homburg, because he called up, and I assumed that he would be doing the introductions as a member of the DEC. And he has just been an extraordinary partner, and Detroit in this area is really blessed to have such a visionary leader and the way in which this has evolved as a way of supporting the community. So I need to make sure that I recognize Rick for that role, and we're really pleased to partner with him and WDET on PBS's new launch of the 24/7 children's channel, PBS Kids. And it really is, I think, an important statement about the values of our speaker and her vision about what the role of public television has to really make a difference in our world. And it really will, I think, ultimately be one of the ways that bends the curve across socioeconomic class for many, many in our community. Growing up in rural Indiana, we have a little bit of a commonality and relying in many ways for access to the arts, to culture, to science in small towns. It was really PBS. And in that, it brought an exposure to a world that for many of us, we couldn't know without it. It's also a trusted source of information in a world in which that is becoming harder and harder to do. It's impressive for me that you can look at all the broadcasts and all the things, and I'm sure Sesame Street is going to be a topic today in varieties of ways. And I do keep Kermit in my office because he reminds me that it's not always easy to be green in any given day. And PBS was very gracious to let Kermit be the homecoming marshal at Michigan State. So there are videos of a conversation between Kermit and me that I hope will never be found again. But we did appreciate that support because WKR was actually a station before PBS was founded. So we've had a very long history with the growth of PBS and are proud that 82% of American TV households now watch PBS, and I'm sure the numbers are growing, and 70% of our children. Paula has been the CEO, president of PBS, and I call it a public media system more than public broadcasting system now for 11 years, making her the longest-serving CEO in PBS's history. She's also president of the PBS Foundation, which raises the funds for PBS and is an increasingly important part of our capacity to support these new projects. She's won many awards and earned many recognitions, including ongoing listening from Hollywood Reporter's annual Women in Entertainment Power 100. Before PBS, she worked for more than a decade in the parent company of WNET in New York, where she rose to executive vice president and COO. Then she led the largest endowment campaign ever undertaken by a public TV station. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Baltimore, where she serves now on the Merrick School of Business Dean's Advisory Council. She's received honorary doctorates from Washington University in St. Louis and Grand Valley State University here in Michigan. She's the director of the International Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, which awards international Emmys each year. And finally, she chairs the board of the Smithsonian Institute's National Museum of Natural History. So I'm really pleased to be able to just give you a snippet of her background. Wikipedia has much more, and whether it's accurate or not, I don't know, but this I can validate.
Yeah, you're accurate there.
You're accurate there. And before I invite Paula to the stage, we'd like to show a brief clip for you.
It's a beautiful day in the state.
We are the curious.
Wow!
The adventurous.
Oh! Grr.
Those venturing out for the first time.
And those who've never lost our sense of wonder.
Whoa! You seen this?
We are the hungry,
The strong.
I must be the greater!
the joyful,
A happy little cloud.
We believe there is always more we can uncover.
More we can explore.
We believed
in the capacity for goodness.
And the potential for greatness.
The torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans.
PBS. PBS.
PBS.
Please join me in welcoming Paula Kerger.
I definitely have the best job in the world. Thank you, Luana, for that kind introduction and for not going to Wikipedia. The collaboration between Michigan State University and public media is, in fact, a model, and I am so delighted to see all the work we're doing, particularly around the Kids Channel, and I look at some partnerships that we've been discussing today and building those out. I think there's tremendous possibilities for it, not just here in Michigan, but truly as a model for the country, and we're excited about that. I'm very humbled to stand here now for the second time during my career with PBS, and I wanted to start by recognizing a few colleagues. Rich Homburg is not only the general manager of Detroit Public Television, he's actually one of my bosses. He's a board member of PBS. Say good things about me to him. And I also want to recognize Susie Elkins, and I'm going to make you stand. You'll be annoyed, but stand up, who is the brand new general manager of WKAR. I know under your leadership there are great days ahead, and I look forward to visiting with you and talking about more that we'll do together. And I want to thank Beth and the Detroit Economic Club for inviting me to speak with you and for really providing me this very important platform. You come together as leaders engaged in the most significant issues facing not just Detroit, but also the shared challenges and opportunities facing our country. In my view, there is no issue of greater import than having an informed and connected society, one in which every child has the tools needed to learn and succeed, and every American has access to information and resources that help them lead meaningful and engaged lives. The purpose of my presentation is to discuss how public media, rooted in communities like Detroit, can serve as a powerful partner in this grand pursuit. Now, the last time I spoke before this esteemed group was in 2008, at the onset of the economic downturn. And as our nation found itself at a crossroads, so did the media industry. People were beginning to access content in new ways. Networks were consolidating, with most of what we see, read, and hear controlled by a handful of organizations. And we started to see an explosion of programming which resulted in more consumer choice than ever before. At the end of the 2008 season, PBS was ranked 15th among all the most watched among all the television and cable networks. With our audience share in decline amid a rapidly changing and competitive landscape, we faced two seminal questions: how to reinvent ourselves for a new age, and how to use the power of public broadcasting to best serve the American public, especially those who have been left behind. As I stand here nearly a decade later, PBS has moved from 15th most watched to 6th. More than 95 million people watch their local PBS station each month, and over the course of a year, 200 million, more than 8 in 10 U.S. television households tune into PBS. Here in your backyard, Detroit Public Television reaches 2 million viewers, including 500,000 children, serving America's most diverse television audience. To keep pace with technological shifts and evolving consumer patterns, PBS and local stations have expanded our distribution via the internet, apps, mobile devices, and games. In fact, Americans watched 350 million videos last month alone, 4.4 billion videos in 2016. So throughout this time, we've held strong on our most important measure of success, our bond with the American people. Every year for the past 14 years, including 2017, Americans ranked PBS and our stations the most trusted public institution in America. All of this we accomplished with an annual content budget that equals roughly what Netflix spent on one high-profile series and a federal investment that amounts to $1.35 per person per year. I used to say that was a cup of coffee, certainly not at Starbucks. So how did we do it? I attribute our success primarily to one thing, an unwavering commitment to our mission. We were created to be uniquely distinct from commercial media, to treat our audiences as citizens, not as consumers. We were founded with the express purpose of educating, inspiring, and entertaining the American public, and that mission has continued to be our guide star. When we looked across the landscape 10 years ago, we observed that cable channels, which were once expected to replace PBS by offering history, drama, and arts, had instead turned to reality programs to attract viewers and improve ratings. It would have been easy for us to follow suit, but that would have betrayed our original purpose and core mission and would have created a tremendous void in the marketplace. At a time when 1 in 5 households do not have cable, 1 in 5 households do not have cable, and 16% lack access to broadband, public television is the only near universal service accessible in almost every home in every community across this country. For many Americans, especially low-income families and those who live in rural areas, public television is their only connection to a wider world. It may be their only opportunity to see a Broadway show or access non-commercial public affairs programming. So as stewards of the People's Network, PBS and nearly 350 local stations strive to make the best use of our expansive reach by offering content and resources that improve lives. Instead of changing course, we doubled down. We made Wednesday nights the smartest night on television with a special focus on science and natural history. We set a new bar for exceptional drama through programs like Sherlock and a little series you may have heard of called Downton Abbey. As the arts virtually disappeared from network television, we expanded our efforts to connect all Americans to the great music, theater, and dance that are the legacy of this country. Last year alone, more than 110 million people tuned in for 600 hours of arts and cultural programming. Who says the arts are dead in this country? And we recommitted to public affairs programming that explore issues from a wide variety of perspectives and viewpoints. Amid an increasingly fragmented and polarized news media with complex issues too often boiled down to hyperbolic sound bites, Americans are hungering for trusted, nonpartisan, in-depth reporting. As evidence of this heightened interest, the PBS NewsHour has experienced a surge in viewership in recent weeks, particularly noteworthy since we are still working through the loss of our dear and beloved Gwen Ifill. I think this recent headline captures the prevailing sentiment. PBS NewsHour is unexciting and even-keeled, and people are loving it. I'm very proud of that. Time and again, the quality of our programming is recognized by third-party validators. As one example, the in-depth documentary series Frontline received 7 awards at last year's News and Documentary Emmys, more than any other series. Our commitment to sharing high-quality and thoughtful work can be found on our historical programs. This September, PBS will present Ken Burns and Lynn Novick's The Vietnam War, which is a multi-part series featuring testimony from nearly 100 witnesses representing a variety of perspectives. We'll hear from Americans who fought in the war and those who opposed it, as well as Vietnamese combatants and civilians. I'm very proud to show you a short clip. Please roll the tape. To capture the enormous consequence of the war and its enduring impact on our country, this series will be presented in 10 parts across 18 hours, providing an in-depth view as never before seen on television. In conjunction with the film, our stations are holding events across the country to convene conversation and foster dialogue. Detroit Public Television is planning 3 screenings for the coming months. The first is scheduled for Wednesday, April 19th, and will feature a special presentation and Q&A with Ken Burns during his visit to his home in Ann Arbor. Detroit, I got up at 5 o'clock this morning. Detroit Public Television is leveraging anticipation around the Vietnam War to bring greater attention to the more than 200,000 Vietnam veterans who live in Michigan. to share their stories, and to honor their services and sacrifices to our country. This epic documentary epitomizes the content we aim to present to the American public, content that illuminates new perspectives, gives oxygen and airtime to complex issues, and encourages civil discourse at a time when it is so desperately needed. At the very core of public broadcasting's work is a pursuit of knowledge and a relentless commitment to education. That commitment begins with our youngest learners. Ever since Mr. Rogers invited America into his living room 5 decades ago, educational programming has been a central focus for PBS and our stations. We adhere to the strong belief that America's future success depends on our ability to prepare the next generation for the opportunities and challenges that lay ahead. Unfortunately, pervasive learning gaps prevent too many children from being prepared for the future, and those gaps can be found at the earliest ages. According to the Annie E. Casey Foundation, more than half of kids in the United States do not have the opportunity to attend a preschool program, making them 25% more likely to drop out of school before graduation. Those numbers are particularly acute in the Detroit metro area, which you well know, where more than 2/3 of children do not attend preschool. For many children, especially those in low-income and underserved families, public television is the only place where they can learn about the environment around them. Here's a look at PBS Kids. Roll the tape.
It's always a good time. Ready, set, go! It's gonna be alright. We don't even have to try. It's always a good time. It's always a good time. We don't even have to try. It's always a good time. It's always a good time.
From Vietnam to Curious George. As you just saw in the video, PBS Kids reaches more children ages 2 to 5 than any other children's network. Our goal is to engage young learners through television, online, mobile, and games to help build the skills needed to jumpstart kids on the path to life and to empower them to be curious, resilient, and empathetic, and to prepare them for the jobs of the future. As we move into a more technology-driven world, the world of the connected car, the jobs that our children will hold will be increasingly tied to STEM, or actually more accurately, STEAM skills. That's why we present programs such as Odd Squad, a live-action show that follows 2 young government agents who use math skills and collaboration to investigate weird and strange phenomena. As we tackle math and literacy, we're also focused on meeting a need that few in early childhood are addressing, giving kids social emotional skills like persistence and self-control that are foundational for success in school. I think skills we all can use. Over the past several years, PBS has commissioned longitudinal studies to assess the impact of our content. If you have little ones in your life, you probably are familiar with Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which follows the animated kin of Daniel Striped Tiger from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. The show is like a kid's guide to the world, and right now it happens to be one of our most popular children's programs. Texas Tech University released the results of a study that found that preschoolers who watch Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood exhibit higher levels of empathy and emotional recognition when paired with active conversation with adults. It isn't enough to feel good about our work. We are committed to moving the needle, and we're committed to reaching as many children as possible with our proven content, especially those children who may not have the opportunity to attend preschool or have access to books or broadband at home. Data shows that a number of children watching television after dinner is more than double the number in the morning. This is especially true for low-income and Hispanic families who watch more television in the evening than the general population. So with this in mind, we recently took a major step forward that you referenced in our commitment to children's to children's service with the launch of PBS Kids 24/7, which is the only free national kids television broadcast service available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are thrilled that both Detroit Public Television and WKAR, in partnership with Michigan State, have launched this new service on TV and via live stream, giving hundreds of thousands of children in Michigan unlimited access to programs including Odd Squad and Daniel Tiger. I'm especially appreciative of Rich, and he was one of our earliest champions for the PBS Kids 24/7 when it was still an idea we were kicking around and not sure we would have the wherewithal to pull together. He was relentless. We've all been on the receiving end of Rich's relentless. So I give him a lot of credit here. Later this year, we will be rolling out a groundbreaking interactive gaming component of the 24/7 service, allowing children to toggle between video and games in order to allow them to extend their learning. And this innovation is really grounded in years of research demonstrating the combination of games and video leads to better learning outcomes. Every child learns differently, and the expansion of media across platforms gives us the ability to personalize the experience to meet their needs and develop tools that help caregivers and teachers build on that learning. Our long-term vision is to create a seamless experience in which kids can watch, play, and interact with content like never before. While public media's educational focus begins in the home, that focus also does extend into the classroom. A few years ago, in partnership with member stations, we launched PBS Learning Media, a free service for all teachers, students, and homeschooling families nationwide that offers access to more than 100,000 digital resources for K-12 students. Here's an example of how it works. PBS and stations recently presented Hamilton's America, and we were so very proud to do it. It was a behind-the-scenes look at the making of the Broadway smash hit. Working in partnership with Hamilton creator Lin-Manuel Miranda and WNET, by the way, Lin-Manuel was an intern at WNET. Be nice to the interns that work in your organizations. A lot of times they end up really well. And together we developed a multimedia curriculum that features lesson plans that connect directly to videos from the film so that students can engage with the arts, history, and civic themes explored in the musical and the documentary. I'd like to share a snippet from one of the lesson plans which teaches students about immigration through the story of Hamilton's upbringing in the Caribbean and his journey to America. Roll the tape.
So who's Alexander Hamilton? Besides being the dude on the 10, the best-looking founding father. He was George Washington's chief of staff during the Revolutionary War, and he was our first Treasury Secretary. But before that, he was an immigrant. He was born in the Caribbean. But he came to our country and, by sheer force of will and intellect, changed our country forever.
I don't even really know if I knew who Alexander Hamilton was. I know he was on our currency.
Alexander Hamilton is one of the unsung heroes of our country.
Yeah, well, that's the way history works. Sometimes it takes a while for people to give you credit.
Hamilton saw the opportunity when an immigrant could come to this country, get a little education, have some great ideas, work hard, and build something. Pretty amazing guy.
It's just one of the many examples of how our national content comes to life in the schools and in the community. But where the magic really happens is through our local stations. In many places, public television and radio stations are the last locally owned and operated broadcasters. In addition to high-quality programming and proven educational content, what truly sets public media apart is our direct engagement with audiences and our ability to tailor content and services to meet the needs of each community. Before I head home tonight, I'll join Rich and the team at Detroit Public Television and members of this community for a special presentation of This Old House, which recently filmed in Detroit for the first time in the program's history. The 10-part series will feature a renovation of the home of retired firefighter Frank Polk. Located in the historic Russell Woods neighborhood, Frank's house was previously one of thousands of homes in need of restoration and was auctioned by the Detroit Land Bank. DPTV is leveraging the story to highlight the city's effort to revitalize neighborhoods, one house at a time. But their work does not begin and end with this one house, nor with this one program. Over the coming months, DPTV will explore neighborhoods across Detroit to draw attention to issues vital to the city's ongoing revitalization, including the quality of schools, uneven access to city services, jobs, and transportation, and more. Instead of applying a top-down approach, DPTV is taking to the streets to speak directly with members of the community, to give them a voice, and to help them build and play an active role in shaping the future of the city they built, the city they love. Detroit Public Television is truly a standout. Whether by shining a light on Vietnam veterans in Michigan, connecting parents, educators, and children with resources to close learning gaps, or bringing attention to the challenges facing neighborhoods, DPTV exemplifies this unique ability of stations to marry national content with local presence to strengthen communities and improve lives. Now, before I conclude my remarks, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the current debate happening on Capitol Hill and whether or not the federal government should continue to invest in programs such as public media. Let me not mince words. The elimination of federal funding for public media would threaten our very existence and would result in tremendous loss for our country. And American voters agree. A recent bipartisan survey found that the large majority of voters of all political stripes in every region of the country oppose eliminating federal funding for public television. At a time when commercial news media pushes Americans apart by dividing us into isolated segments, public media brings people together. At a time when low-income and rural families risk falling behind, public media's proven educational content is available in nearly every single home, whether you're a single mom in Detroit or a coal miner in West Virginia. At a time when trust for nearly every national institution has eroded, the American people continue to put their trust in PBS and local stations. The president's budget proposes to make America great again. In a lecture just this week, Monday night, at the J.F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, the Ford Foundation's president, Darren Walker, gave an amazing speech, and he said, "It is we, the people, who make our nation great. It is we, the people, not some faceless government, who choose to invest in ourselves and our culture. It is we, the people, who believe in supporting the small rural museums and local theater groups and mom and pop music festivals that bring people together across this country." I agree with Darren. I strongly believe that PBS and member stations are a part of what makes America great, because we derive our strength and our inspiration from the communities we serve. As Rich Homburg often tells me, Detroit is the most important city in America at the most important time in history. As I stand before this venerable institution nearly a decade later, I can see that the traits that led to the rise of this iconic city, innovation, perseverance, and determination, are the same ones that are fueling your resurgence, yet again paving the way for the rest of the country. I know that I join Rich, Susie, and all of my colleagues in public media when I say that we are proud to join you for this incredible journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And now I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you. As you could imagine, there's a set of questions here regarding funding. And let me sort of lump them together so that you can respond to multiple aspects rather than doing it sort of sequentially. There are people who want to know what they can do to be helpful in terms of what they can do to continue to support, what arguments they might be prepared to make to others, not simply keep this. There are those who are questioning sort of how you respond to allegations regarding comments that PBS is a liberal, ideology-oriented operation overall. And there are also concerns about sort of what's the backup plan. And I think that relates to the difference between the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and PBS.
Okay, so there's a lot of questions in there, and so I'm going to tell it all in a story, I think, and I'll try to cover them all and listen carefully. So if I'm missing any of the questions you just asked me, you just have to give me a hard time about it. So the funding that comes into the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which is the federal funding that comes to public media, television and radio, actually does not go to PBS. And I think part of the confusion when you see these images of Big Bird being taken out is a little inaccurate. The money actually goes to our stations. And it goes to stations across the country. In aggregate, it represents about 15% of the revenue that stations bring in every year. That's an aggregate number. And so for some stations, it's a smaller percentage. It can be 9 or 10%. For stations, particularly stations in rural parts of the country, it can be much as 50 or 60% in the case of Alaska. And so for those stations, of which there are 86 rural stations in this country, it is an existential question. And so we fight very hard to maintain the federal appropriation because we do worry that all Americans should have access to the kind of content that we produce. And we particularly worry about rural communities for whom there may not be other opportunities for some of the content that we deliver. People sometimes think this is an argument about, New York or LA or Washington, and it really is an argument about preserving something for the heartlands and for what I think really is a service that over the 50 years since the signing of the Public Broadcasting Act, this is our 50th anniversary of that great legislation that enabled the corporation, we have proven to be a very effective public-private partnership. So what can you do? Well, if you have an opinion about it, you can let your legislators know, because I, believe it or not, do not spend a huge amount of time up on Capitol Hill. People are interested sometimes in talking to me about what we're doing. They certainly are interested if they see something that they don't like. I get those calls. But who they really care about are their constituents. And so if you have a point of view, let them know. If this is something you value, let them know. It's easy. Pick up the phone and call, or go online and send an email. That's one thing you can do. Second thing you can do is you can support Detroit Public Television and WKAR. We make this work because it is, in fact, I believe, one of the best public-private partnerships that has existed in our government. We take a small amount of money and we leverage it many times over. And think about what I said. Netflix, our entire content budget is less than what Netflix spent on The Crown. So we take what is not really a large amount of money, and I always think it's sort of like Rapunzel spinning gold out of straw. We try to leverage it. We build partnerships. We don't sit on our hands. We know that these are very difficult decisions that have to be made on Capitol Hill. And so we would not for a minute want to just lean back and say, well, it's okay, the government will take care of it, because that's not right. What is right is making sure that where the government can't take care of, it's there to fill the gaps, and that we are proactive in raising money in places where we can, and in building partnerships with organizations, and we do work with people like Amazon and Netflix to make sure that we have the resources that we need to build this wonderful array of programming that you enjoy. Plan B, that was the one I happened to ask, right? And liberal, I didn't forget the liberal question. In terms of service in rural communities, I don't have a plan B. For the stations that I'm talking about who are heavily reliant on public television, I think the reality is they will go away. And I think as a society we lose if particularly the kids that are relying on over-the-air television, we can drop in cable into markets that may lose their public television service. We can do that. But we will be missing out millions of people in this country who do watch over-the-air television. And in fact, in many homes, there may be cable that goes to one set, but a lot of times the kids are watching the set that's in the family room or in the bedroom that is just connected to over there. That's why when we launched this 24-hour channel, we did it as an over-the-air channel. No one's launching a television channel anymore, but we did, because we feel, and it's 24 hours because we are as concerned about the kids that are in hospital beds that are up all night and reaching them. If I was running a commercial service, we'd do infomercials and we'd make money. But I want to make sure that kids, when they need us most, have access to that content. So that's the Plan B answer. And liberal, I don't think Daniel is liberal. I don't think that, people always look at our news service, and I look at the people that appear on it, and I know how valued it is. I don't see the work that we're doing as liberal and conservative. When I ran our station in New York, I used to look at our feedback line and all the overnight comments that we would get, and we would largely get them around the news. That's when I think people principally think about whether there's a liberal or conservative bent. Sometimes I wondered if people were watching the same broadcast. You were too easy on the president, you were too hard on the president. Those were the days I actually knew we got it right, because if we were making everybody a little uncomfortable, we probably did our job. But I also think that most of the work we're doing, we're doing 8 hours of children's programming a day. I don't think that has a bias. I think when you watch the Ken Burns documentary, I can tell you that we had former military members that were in tears because no one had tried to tell this complicated, difficult story. Our story as a country is complicated, and we view ourselves as being America's storyteller, and I don't think that has any bias at all.
I think let me sort of push a bit. The amount of news that you do in a week is a very minimal part of the programming of PBS. Where all of this, so if you consider arts and culture to be liberal, then I suppose you do a lot of liberal programming. But the news part is really infinitesimal in what you program.
And I think we work very hard. I mean, look, no one tunes into the news hour to watch breaking news. That's not the business we're in. We provide context. And I think, what we try to do, and this is where sometimes people say that we're a little stodgy, but what we try to do is actually do more than a 2-minute soundbite. We try to actually explain, and we try to get different perspectives around the table so that we can talk about the important issues of our time.
Well, let's talk about something really controversial, Sesame Street. Both Elmo's role in the political process that you mentioned, that some find as being a biased use of Elmo, but also the introduction of new characters and how you've evolved the role of Sesame Street to be more, I would say, contemporary. Others might say more edgy.
Okay, so Elmo is a good and easy question. The video that's viral was not created by us. It was created by the public. Even though it's tagged at the end to go to PBS /support, that actually isn't a real link. If you click on it, it doesn't go anywhere. So that was created by the public, and that's actually really the interesting thing. I was telling Rich when he picked me up from the airport today that there was a group that delivered 660,000 petitions on Capitol Hill. I got called 2 days before the event and they let me know that, by the way, we've gathered 660,000 petitions. We're going to drop them off. Is there anything you want to tell us? And or you want to share, or do you want to come? And I unfortunately couldn't come. They went to Capitol Hill. It was a group of moms and others. There was 3 or 4 organizations that had come together down there. That to me is the best example of public. And so if you are online and you see all these, Sesame images and various, particularly Big Bird, for whatever reason, everyone sort of, and Elmo, we've had nothing to do with any of it. That's the public. And that's why I think public media is so powerful, because the public actually believes they own it, because in fact you do. In relation to Sesame Street, the second question, last week or earlier this week, Sesame announced Julia. And Julia is a new character on Sesame Street. She appeared last year mostly in digital form, but this year she is appearing as a character, and Julia has autism. And the one thing that I think Sesame has done beautifully is to really think about how they can help every child. This was Fred Rogers' secret as well, how to make every child feel special, and how to make every child feel empowered. And so I think Julia is just all the press and all the discussion about it clearly has struck a beautiful chord. And I think that she's a lovely redhead, and she is Abby's friend. So if you watch Sesame, you know Abby Cadabby, who is a fairy. And Abby and Julia are best friends, and I think that it's a great addition. What Sesame has done over the years is they have really tried to step in where they see gaps. So a few years ago, they realized, actually the then president of Sesame Street read a piece in the New York Times that talked about the number of children whose parents, and in some cases both parents, were being deployed. And he thought about the number of preschoolers that were suddenly in a very strange place where, and they began imagining what those conversations were, and how parents were navigating through talking to their children about what happens when mom and dad are deployed. And so they did a whole series of resources, both video as well as digital resources, and we worked with military bases across the country. They then came back and did a second round that were geared towards families who were coping with a mom or dad that came back changed, and how to help, whether that was a physical change that was apparent, or in the case of PTSD, may not be as visible, but as disturbing to children. And then they came back and did a third series of how to talk to children when mom and dad do not come home. And I think that it's that kind of work that distinguishes what we do in public television from any other, because the only reason to do work like that is when you see a need in communities, and to try to think about ways that we can help parents and families and communities wrestle with both challenges as well as the beauty of life.
So I've left the hardest question for last, and Beth's giving me 1 minute to answer it. So that's probably the challenge, 3 minutes to answer it. The question is, if you were to describe one or two things that you think PBS would be like 10 years from now.
Oh, that is the hardest question.
Well, but because your values have remained the same in many ways across. So I'm going to give you a piece of that.
Yeah.
And you've dealt with new media. So I want to take those as givens, just for a moment. And so what 10 years from now, given assume that PBS will remain core and evolve in new media, what's out there?
So you gave me half the answer, because
I
when
did,
people ask me
because
that question,
I didn't want
you wanted to rush me along.
I did want to rush you along. Or Beth is going to kill me.
We've become fast friends already. So look, we're working on a strategic plan right now, and it's a 3-year plan, because I'm having trouble, frankly, thinking out what beyond a year. When I look back 10 years ago when I was here, actually 11 years ago when I first took the job, iTunes announced they were selling episodes of Desperate Housewives for $1.99, and that seemed like such a weird idea. That was 10 years ago. Facebook, Twitter didn't exist, YouTube, so I mean, look at how much of what we accept now in our media consumption is here that wasn't here 10 years ago. So when I talk to all the students, and I encourage you to really think about not just what jobs and what life looks like now, but really to imagine the world's going to be very different, certainly when you take over and you run things. And so I think that for us, what we've tried to imagine is the fact that we're going to probably be in multiple places. I think that nothing is going to go back. We're not going back to a time when there were a few stations and you had to, go to a television set to watch it. I think, platforms like tablets and so forth, or some version of those will continue. I think interesting technologies like virtual reality, which is very empathetic and I think has potential. Whether that will really take off, I don't know. What someone said to me once is the important thing is to always imagine the future, and we continue to put little bets on things as they begin to build out, and we're particularly interested in the education value of technology. But what is the most important is what stays the same. And I think that if we do what we've done over the last 10 years, over the last 50 years of our history of staying focused on content that truly does make a difference in people's lives, however people are experiencing that almost doesn't matter. As long as we keep the core values intact, we'll be successful, and I'll be here again in the next 10 years.
Thank you for your leadership.